Guys. I know this course is technically asynchronous, and not technically it is. But one fairly consistent point of feedback I got last term was a lot of folks said, even though it was asynchronous, it would be helpful to get a little bit more hands-on guidance. And so one thing I'm going to try to do this semester with you guys is try to record a little bit more kind of week to week assistance where we maybe talk through some of the key themes and maybe lessons, maybe work through a lab or two, but just something to give you guys a little bit of a leg up as you're working through them. So I'm going to walk through one of the labs this week, just talk through some of the logistics working in ZyBooks, just get a little feel for what we're going to be doing. Now, the first thing I'm going to note is, oh wow, that's kind of funky. My headphones are like coming in and out of the blurred background. So maybe I'm not going to blur with that. That's kind of awkward. Okay, so one of the things that I'm sort of assuming going into this, because CIS 12 was a prerequisite, is that in addition to having sort of a basic familiarity with Python and a lot of the concepts therein, you'll also have a familiarity with ZyBooks because ZyBooks obviously is the weapon of choice that we used for Python, better or worse. So we're obviously doing the same thing here for Java, and there's an interesting thing about how ZyBooks chose to do Java, and mixed feelings about it. Ultimately, I kind of like it, but it's a choice, and I'm not sure how you guys are going to feel about this. But they deliberately opted to replicate many of the labs from the Intro to Python course for the Java course as well. And so the idea being, presuming that you go through a progression where you have mastered Python in ZyBooks, you will now sort of in parallel be able to do a number of the same exercises, but be able to sort of take a gander at how it's done in Java. And again, that's a choice. And on one hand, it may feel a little bit repetitive. It may be like, hey, I've seen this before. I've seen this. I've done this. Give me something new. Give me something novel. On the other hand, I think it helps to give a little bit of a basis for clarity because you have already probably a framework in mind for how to do it when you're working in a language like Python, and the ability to compare and contrast methods with Java. Hopefully will be informative and illustrative. And so at least that's my impression when I was sort of looking through and preparing a lot of the material for this. I hope you feel the same way, but we will see. So again, if you have worked in ZyBooks before, hopefully this should be familiar to you. If you have not, so either way, hope this is, for those of you familiar with this should be a quick refresher. For those of you who aren't, hopefully this will get you up to speed in short order. First point to note, so you may remember your grades are recorded here on Canvas. Not so ZyBooks obviously scores your readings and your assignments, but the grades have to be reflected here in Canvas for you ultimately to receive credit. Now, the way to do that is you have to make sure when you click through on these, either the readings or the labs, that you click through on Canvas, this sort of big button here, to load the lab. Now, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this sort of at the outset. You can theoretically do the work in ZyBooks first and then click through. But clicking this button is critical because it links your performance, your score in ZyBooks, with your Canvas grade. And again, just to emphasize, the work that you do in Canvas, the work that you do, the grade that shows up in Canvas is ultimately what is going to be reflected in your final grade. So I do want to make sure that we don't get into a scenario where we're doing the work in ZyBooks, but you're not getting credit for it in Canvas, and therefore you're not getting the grade you deserve. I will send up a reminder closer to the end of the term, just to double check, make sure you've done that. But in general, best way to avoid that is just simply to go to Canvas, click through, and then load the assignments this way. Okay, so we're going to load a lab here in ZyBooks. Again, assuming you've worked here, you should be familiar with this. This will be very familiar to you by design. Even the lab itself, Zylab's Training Basics. So this is sort of your basic training, getting a hello file to be read. Again, exactly like the Intro to Python version, right? We had, just like in Python, there is a there is a program here, a script. It's read only, so it's uneditable in its current form. And this sort of basic program is designed to read in a file name from the user and parse that file, print out the results. And one thing I want to note, just sort of from the get-go, is that a lot of we'll talk about some of the things happening here, but the first thing to note is that just like in Python, don't necessarily look at this as being representative of where you should be as you're kind of beginning to work through Java. Like, this code is not reflective of chapter one capabilities. A lot of things we're going to be doing and talking about here are later chapter stuff. This is just a program that is designed to run so that you could more familiarize yourself with how Zylabs as a coding platform works, not necessarily how, doing actual coding exercises. So with that said, though, so you may remember, again, from Python, very similar basic, right? Setup. Zylabs sort of maintains its own IDE. It's attached to sort of a cloud-hosted computing instance. You'll note that it has sort of a console where if the program is run, you can sort of click here to run it. Any inputs and outputs will be captured here on the console. You also have a file management system here that runs as well. So you may remember also that whenever you want to, you can submit for grading. And in fact, just as a general policy, so for this course, just like with the Python course I run, you have unlimited submissions. And in fact, I encourage you guys, as you're working through labs, to submit as frequently as you can, as frequently as you want to, because it's just a great way of just getting a benchmark for how you're being assessed, right? ZyBooks will show you how they're scoring your thing. They'll show you kind of what your program is outputting versus what the expected thing is. And so as you can see here, right, we got an exception. We'll talk a little bit about it in a moment, but at the moment, our score is 0 out of 3. You can also, again, run the code directly from here if you want to just test it without necessarily doing it. So you're going to see here, it's preparing the environment, it's running it. Okay, now it's running, it's taking in an input. I believe it's looking for hello world.txt. Okay, it threw up an exception for me, and you will see why momentarily. But that's sort of the basics of how you access assignments. Theoretically, how you work, you can sort of edit here. You can choose to work on your own IDE and then sort of submit the code if you want to, or you can just work directly here. It does save and sync your work here, so there's no necessarily concern about you losing your work. I would say, though, do check this icon here. Do make sure you're always connected, make sure it's syncing. There have been instances where it's been disconnected, particularly if you sort of leave a window open for a long time. It will sometimes disconnect, and that will create issues. So make sure you kind of run that periodically just to make sure it's being saved. And if you ever see sort of a loading bar of death where it's just kind of loading, and then it's not syncing, just be aware that it is not updating. And in that case, what I would do is just copy your code, refresh the page, and then do it. I will not relate to that, and I have had this issue too. I've made updates to the code, I've submitted it for grading, it will still show the error, and I'll be like, what's going on here? I thought I fixed that. Turns out I did, it just didn't sync the update to the code. So always check this little icon here, make sure it's synced, because that is ultimately what is being, in this case, compiled and run on the cloud. So, okay, with that said, so let's take a look at this. So again, this is, we're going to, as we can do in the program, we're going to sort of parse this out. I just want to call out sort of a few things just for note. So the first thing, again, if you're coming from a Python world to here, is that so much, the ideas are similar. Both Python and Java are object-oriented programming languages. Both of them, particularly at the higher levels, rely very heavily on class and object-based notations. However, where Python is a much more, let's say, user-friendly, plug-and-play mechanism, Java is a lot more explicit and upfront about things. Java, a lot of the plumbing, if you will, a lot of the pipe work to kind of get it up and running is much more explicit in Java in a way that isn't necessarily in Python. And one of the ways you sort of see that is we will almost always wrap basically any program within a class notation, even if we're not necessarily invoking objects, which we are not in this case. Um, we will almost always wrap our programs within classes. So you'll notice both of these are sort of a public class. Public is sort of a keyword. I'll just kind of highlight a few things to sort of give you this. The public class is what allows both the class and methods within it to be accessible outside of the class and outside of the program. So that's sort of a key thing to note. You'll notice here we sort of define a lab program class, and then within that we have sort of a primary method that we're defining here, the main method, which obviously the main method is the primary method that's invoked when the program is executed. You'll notice here a couple other keywords that are sort of critical keywords. Again, these are the sort of things you'll see pop up time and time again. They will become secondhand nature to you in a matter of weeks. The first is static. So static is a critical keyword for a lot of these methods because static basically defines that this method is a class level method, not an object level method. And this is a concept we don't touch on in the introductory class. This is something we talk about in the advanced Python class. But the basic idea is that this method belongs to the overall class. It is not attached to specific objects. And what that means is I do not need to invoke an object in order to access this method, right? If you think about like a typical kind of class where you have to create the object and then you can sort of run an associated method with it, that's not the case here. But in this case, because this is a class level method, you don't have to create an object to leverage this method. We can just simply run the method directly just by invoking it. And because it's also a public method, it's accessible outside of the program, outside of the class. The other sort of keyword I want to sort of call it is void. Void speaks to the output of the method. And typically when you're not having an explicit return, which we are not in this case, right? The method itself, right? It's doing things, it's executing code, but it's not having an explicit return. The void helps define that. And of course, right, this method is main. That's what, when the Java program runs, it's ultimately executing the main method. And then the only thing I'll note is this throws IO exception. So here it's basically saying that in the event that, right, there's sort of a built-in try and except sort of block for us. If it throws up an exception, that's not going to be handled within the method, but that's going to be sort of piped through to the broader program, which is actually sort of what you see happening here, right? We ran this thing and we got this input output thing here. In this case, you can sort of see here, right? We try to execute hello world, and then we got this exception here saying such file or directory. And if we just take a gander here, indeed, there is no text file here. We should probably do something about that. And we will momentarily. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about this notation here. Oh, I will note here a couple sort of import statements. Scanner is one we are going to use extensively. Scanner we use to parse, we're going to use to parse user input. Yeah, it's going to be a very commonly utilized library. Almost all of our labs will use it. File input stream is another one in the event that we're going to be working with external files. It's just a sort of a Java's utility library for handling input-output connections and streams. And again, streams is something we talk about more in the advanced Python thing, but it's the idea of sort of opening, right, when you have static resources on your device, in this case, files. By opening a stream, you're essentially creating an ongoing connection to that file for reading, writing, editing purposes. Yeah, and of course, we then load the exception, which we then throw in the event that we raise an error. Okay, so yeah, so as you can see here, we tried to run this program. It clearly did not work, and easy sort of note our cause here, we did not create the text file. So let's go ahead and do that very easily here in the file management thing. Okay, I think I just need to do hello world.txt. I believe, let me just make sure. Input. Okay, input is hello.txt. Okay. Hello.txt. Create that. It's there. I'm going to double click to open it directly in the text. So, what's up? All right, it is saving. Okay, good. It's synced. Let me just submit this for grading now. Okay. 0 out of 3. But good news is we have made progress. So the first thing to note here, right, and you're going to see this, oftentimes when we run these programs, it will do regex things early on. There'll be utility unit tests and some other things that may run in later chapters. But at least for now, it does a direct regex comparison. Inputs, outputs, right? Is the output of this program matching the expected output? And in this case, you can sort of see here it's highlighting, right? Oh, it expected the text hello world. I provided was a, okay, clearly that was a mistake. All right, let me go back. Got to fix that. Go back here. So I'm going to say hello. I'm going to save that again. Discuss grading. All right. So here you're going to see really quickly, you'll notice here that part of the text net, right? We're still 0 out of 3. So we still haven't actually gotten the grade we want. We're still getting an error, but you're going to notice we're getting closer, right? The hello part is now no longer highlighted. We're matching the partial script. What we're missing is this part here. Well, let me go back here. Paste that in. Let's save it. Spell it again. And this time, total score 3 out of 3. We are good to go. And I will note that your score will automatically update on Canvas. So, if you open an assignment, if you open a reading thing, you may notice, for instance, like when you open a reading assignment, your grade may initially go down, or it may even look like a 0 or something like that. Don't worry. As long as this connection is made, it just has to be made once. ZyBooks will update. So you can continue to run. You can continue to submit these for grading as much as you want. Your highest grade is ultimately what's going to count. So, all right, that's what I got for this week. Good luck getting started, and excited to go on this journey into Java with you. Have a great evening, or a great morning, or afternoon, or wherever or whenever it happens to be for you guys.